So we're going to get started now. Thank you very much for coming this afternoon. And my name is Harry Webney-Behrman. I work on campus in the Office of Human Resource Development, and it's my privilege in this project to be the lead of what we call the collaboration team within the HR design project. Our role in the collaboration team has been to make sure that throughout this process, we are appropriately engaging everyone in the campus community, providing timely and meaningful information, as well as opportunities for feedback and clarification throughout the project. This information session this afternoon is one of a whole series of conversations that we've been having with the campus community throughout the project, and I appreciate everybody being here this afternoon, as well as tuning in for the live stream of the presentation. This is the English language presentation in this room. If you are interested in participating in either the Spanish, Tibetan, Hmong, or Mandarin Chinese versions of the presentation, those are happening in other rooms just next door down the hall. In a moment, I'll be introducing Bob Lavigna, the head of the project, the head of the Office of Human Resources on campus. I want to bring to your attention a couple of things as we get started. You'll be finding on your seats, I hope, a little half sheet here with 3 questions in which we're going to be asking you after Bob's presentation for some feedback. We really want to understand from you, how clear was the presentation? How readily do you feel you're understanding what's going on in HR design so that you can explain it to coworkers across campus? That's really important to us. And then if you have any suggestions for how we can make things even more clear in future presentations, then that feedback's really important and timely. We also will be welcoming your questions after Bob completes his presentation. As you came into the room, you could have picked up, and we'll also be passing around little white index cards, and that's one way by which we're able to receive your questions, and I'll read through those and make sure that we're able to hear all of the themes of questions that come up this afternoon. In addition, we'll have microphones that we'll be taking around so people can also ask questions from the floor. Another way that people can participate is through the live stream, and if you have a question that you want to enter on the website, we're monitoring those questions and making sure that they as well are coming up front so that we can respond to them. In addition to covering updates on HR design this afternoon, we will also be discussing the new Critical Compensation Fund, and so that will also be part of the information that Bob will be discussing with the group this afternoon. So again, thank you very much for being here, and with that, I'll turn it over to Bob.
Thanks, Harry, and I also want to thank you for being here today. As Harry said, this is another in our series of forums to make sure that everyone who is interested and wants to know about what's going on in HR design has that opportunity. We do these about every 3 months, and every time we do them, we do 4 sessions. So the reason it says November 13th up there is because we did this last week on November 13th. We're doing it again right now. And then we have a session tonight from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. So if you'd like to come back, you're welcome to do that. And then Thursday evening again, 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. And I said this morning that this is the last time that we're going to do 2 midnight sessions in the same week. But we're very happy to do that, not just the daytime sessions, but also the evening sessions, because it's really important for us to reach out to the folks who work on the 2nd and 3rd shifts to make sure that they have an opportunity to not only hear what's going on, but also ask questions and provide some feedback. So what we'll do this afternoon is cover what our strategy is going forward, give you a little bit of background, go back to where we were in July when we had some pretty important things happen with this HR design project, where we were then, our adjusted timeline, because back in July, many of you will recall, we were all set to go to implement many of the components of this new personnel human resources system on July 1st, 2013, and then the legislature imposed a 2-year delay in those components that require statutory change. So we're continuing to work on those components, but we did have to kind of recalibrate our planning and our scheduling. What we're going to do moving forward, what we're going to be implementing between now and July 1st, 2015, and then we'll also talk about those components that we can't implement until July 1st, 2015, and then we'll provide some key takeaways And then, as Harry said, after we talk about the HR design, we'll have an opportunity for questions, and then I'll talk about the Critical Compensation Fund, which is not part of HR design, but it's something that we just announced last week, and we want to make sure that everybody understands how that's going to roll out this year. So that's the agenda. Our overall strategy, we're not starting new. Even though we had the 2-year delay, we haven't gone back to square one. We have actually used what the campus told us through the work groups, what's in the HR Design Strategic Plan, which is still on our website, hrdesign.wisc.edu. We're using our subject matter experts, primarily folks who are in the HR community across the campus, because we're doing technical design of this new personnel system. We're also consulting with governance groups. We formed a shared governance group that has representatives from all of the campus governance groups, faculty, academic staff, and classified employees, and we'll talk about the new classified employee governance group. We're meeting with that shared governance group periodically to get their input and feedback on the detailed design of this new HR system. And of course, we're continuing to engage through information sessions like this, through Inside UW-Madison, through streaming sessions like this, et cetera. We're really trying very hard on a regular basis to communicate as widely as we can to the campus community. And at the moment, since the beginning of this thing, about 1.5 years ago, our sessions have drawn around 12,000 people. So we're trying very hard to make sure that everyone who wants to know about what's going on has that opportunity. So where were we in July of 2015? The legislature, surprisingly, decided to delay the components of HR design that require statutory approval, and primarily those aspects of this new system that relate to changes to classified employees. And as you may recall, what happened is the news came out that UW system had around a $650 million reserve fund, which people immediately began to refer to as a surplus. There was a huge political controversy about it, and the legislature reduced our budget, UW System's budget, including UW-Madison, and said, oh, by the way, since we don't like what you did with the reserve fund, we're also going to delay the implementation of the new HR system. So where we were in July was we sorted all of the new components of HR design into 3 buckets. Things we can implement between now and July 1st, 2015, and those would be the things that don't require changes to state law, what we can partially implement between now and then, and those components where we really have to wait until July 1st, 2015, and until the legislature approves those components. So that's where we were then. What we have been doing between now and then is adjusting the timeline, setting new priorities, sort of reordering how we're going to roll out HR design. Some of you were on the HR design work teams, and you may recall that we told the work teams to think big, not just come up with recommendations about what the legislation gave us the authority to do, that is, those things that require changes to Chapter 230, which pertains to the classified workforce, but think broader than that. Identify what we need to do on this campus to make sure that we can attract, develop, and retain the same kind of talent we have now that has made us a world-class university. So it really put us in good shape with respect to moving forward despite the delay. So what we've done is we've adjusted the timeline, keeping in mind the 2-year delay, identified those things that we're working on right now, winter 2013-14, those things that we're going to roll out, we plan to roll out in the spring of next year, summer of next year, fall of next year, next winter, a year from now, and then in the spring of 2015. So we've gone through a very detailed process of taking a look at every single recommendation that's in the HR Design Strategic Plan and slotting those recommendations into these timeframes. So what we're working on right now a review of how the Office of Human Resources is organized. We made a commitment as part of the strategic plan to take a look internally at how our office is organized, make sure that we're structured in the right way so that we can manage this new system, that not only do we have the right organizational structure, but we have the right sets of competencies to manage this new system. Also, the Classified Staff Executive Committee, I'll talk more about that in a moment, an important part of the strategic plan to give the classified staff formal governance rights. Faculty have formal governance rights, academic staff have formal governance rights, our students have formal governance rights. But until now, classified employees didn't have those governance rights. We had organizations of classified employees that we dealt with sort of like they had governance rights, but it was not formalized, and now it is. So that's a very important step. In the spring of next year, we will be producing a toolkit around what workplace flexibilities are available to our employees and how they can access those flexibilities. Individual flexibilities will still be up to managers, supervisors, and their direct reports to figure it out, but one of the conclusions that we came to in the HR design work was that people really don't understand across this campus what workforce flexibilities and workplace flexibilities are, how to access them. Managers and supervisors really don't get why these things are important. They're not just perks for our employees, but they actually can help improve productivity. So we took it upon ourselves and have taken it upon ourselves in OHR to do this educational piece and produce this toolkit. Then in the summer, quite a few things will roll out. A new applicant tracking system, starting with academic staff, and I'll talk about what that is in a moment. We plan to expand our employee engagement survey, which we conducted across the 14 units that report to the Vice Chancellor for Finance Administration. We did that a couple of years ago. We're going to repeat that for those units, and we also hope to expand it to some academic units. Produce the Workforce Diversity Framework and Plan. We're doing that in cooperation with the Ad Hoc Diversity Committee, which has also been holding a series of forums, including several evening forums. I hope some of you attended those. Be rolling out some new policies and practices around performance management to try to do everything we can to make sure that all of our employees understand what their roles are, what their expectations are, what their goals are, that they're provided the opportunity to discuss development and also get regular feedback and performance evaluations. We want to make sure that's done across the campus. Right now, it's done some places, not done in other places. We need to be more consistent about that. We're going to be producing an HR dashboard, a set of metrics, measures, that will allow us to understand how well we're doing in attracting, developing, and retaining talent. We don't have a campus-wide set of measures like that right now. And we're also going to be developing a set of competencies for the HR community, not just in the Office of Human Resources, excuse me, but across the whole campus, identifying those things that our HR professionals need to be able to do and do well. So a lot of stuff that we're working on that we plan to implement next summer. Then in the fall, a new policy and training and practices around new employee onboarding to make sure that when we hire someone new into our workforce, we make sure that they have the support, the resources, the tools, and the knowledge that they need to be successful as quickly as possible. Then next winter, we're going to be doing a better job, we hope, from the standpoint of our own organization, the Office of Human Resources, in communicating. For example, right now, we have a whole bunch of different websites, and it's very confusing to me, so I can imagine what it's like to all of you to find information, to find the information they need about personnel and human resources. So we need to do a much better job in organizing and communicating that information. Also, we'll be rolling out what we're describing as recruitment, assessment, and selection toolkit, a new set of approaches to not only recruit, but also evaluate job candidates that we think will be much more timely, efficient, and effective. And then building on the HR professional competencies down here, rolling out a professional certification program so we can all be assured that our HR professionals have the competencies that they need to be successful. And then next spring, we'll be taking a look at all of our jobs to make sure that those jobs that are covered by the Fair Labor Standards Act are the correct jobs, and those jobs that are exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act are the correct jobs. We have to make sure that we're doing that right, and there's some concern right now that some of our jobs are misclassified. We're going to combine some of our insurance programs. We hope right now, for example, we have 5 life insurance programs, kind of confusing. People don't really know why we have 5, how to pick the right one, so we hope to combine some of them, and then come up with a set of standard and consolidated HR policies, so we don't have one set for unclassified employees and one set for classified employees. It's very confusing and inconsistent. So that's how those things that we can do, despite the delay, how we plan to roll them out over the next essentially year and a half. So then the summer of 2015, when we get approval, which we plan and hope to get from the legislature, we'll be able to implement those things that have been delayed for 2 years. And that includes creating more flexibility around compensation. We're describing that as a transitional compensation program until we do this large-scale classification and compensation review. We'll be out of the state classified hiring program, so we're going to have to do an expanded focus on how to recruit and hire. We will do some things between now and 2015, but on July 1st, 2015, we have to have a completely new system specifically tailored to our needs. We'll be able to make sure that everybody on this campus earns a living wage. That was one of the first things we were going to do on July 1st, 2013. We have around, Mark, how many? We have about 700 employees on this campus who earn less than the living wage as calculated by the city of Madison. That's shameful. And we had already allocated the money. We were all set to go, but we cannot do that until July 1st, 2015 because we're still regulated by the state compensation plan. We will do that as soon as we can. An applicant tracking system to make sure that when candidates apply for jobs, it's as user-friendly as possible, and we know who's applying for our jobs. Right now, we really don't have good data on who's applying for our jobs. Are we getting diverse applicant pools? How many people are applying, et cetera? We need to do that. First day health insurance for classified employees, that is the employer-paid share of health insurance right now. New classified employees have to wait 2 months for that. We want to make sure that they get immediate employer share of health insurance, just like unclassified employees. Coming up with a set of manager and supervisor competencies. So again, as a campus community, we agree on what we want our managers and supervisors to be good at, what they should be doing, and then we have accountability across the campus for those competencies. Enhanced manager and supervisor training. We're doing that right now. We'll fully implement a new set of training programs at this time. But if we expect our managers and supervisors to do certain things and to be good at certain things, we got to make sure that we're training them. We're going to combine the catastrophic leave program. Right now, if an employee is classified and needs leave for a health issue, for example, unclassified employees can't donate leave, and vice versa. We want to create a single catastrophic leave program. And then university staff vacation change. What that means is classified employees, now called classified, they'll be called university staff, will be able to take their vacation right from the start of when we hire them, not having to wait 6 months. Unclassified employees can take their vacation right away. There's no reason, other than state law, that classified employees shouldn't have that same opportunity. We'll do this big classification and compensation study, which we think will really help us make sure that we understand where we need to be compensation-wise to be competitive for talent, also simplify our classification system, which right now has around 1,700 job titles. This is employee category choice program. If you may recall, part of the HR design calls for us to move exempt classified employees, that is classified employees who are salaried, move them gradually into the academic staff. And what we're going to do is give every employee who's in that category, who's classified and is salaried, the option to move into the academic staff. They won't have to. We'll provide every one of them with individual counseling so they understand what that means. If they want to move, they can. If they don't want to move, they can stay classified, or as we'll call it, university staff for the rest of their careers. And then we need to create a set of temporary employee policies around what we're now calling LTEs, project employees, et cetera, because we'll be out of the state system as of July 1st, 2015. So that's an overview of where we're going between now and the summer of 2015. And we did this last week. Somebody commented, well, there really isn't, I didn't really hear anything new. Well, this is new because this is our new roadmap to implementing the HR design strategic plan. It's a lot different than what we thought it would look like last spring, primarily because of the legislative change. Also need to create new layoff policy, new grievance and appeals policy, and new probationary policies, because we'll no longer be covered by the classified policies. And we began working with the shared governance groups to develop these new policies under the assumption that we would implement them on July 1st, 2013, but because of the delay, we now have to wait until July 1st, 2015. So that's a list of the things that are going to affect in about a year and a half. So this solar system shows what we're doing, what we're working on right now. It's just a different way of looking at what I just described. So all of the planets around the sun are the activities that we're working on right now that are going to go into effect over the next several months. So let's talk a little bit more specific. Classified staff governance, we had the election. It was just completed in the fall of 2013. We had a very high participation rate in the election of the Classified Staff Governance Executive Committee, much higher than the faculty and academic staff. So we're feeling, and classified employees should feel good about that as well. So we have the new Classified Staff Executive Committee. You see the names of those candidates who are elected. I know we have a couple of them in the room, if you wouldn't mind standing up. We'll do that on a voluntary basis. If people don't want to move, they don't have to. If they're salaried and they do want to move, they can. As those positions become vacant, we will move them into the academic staff, but no one will be required to move from what is now classified to academic staff. I mentioned the catastrophic leave programs and this classification and compensation study. This is going to be a pretty big deal. We may do that in cooperation with UW System. We haven't figured that out yet. We have decided to wait on this study because we don't want to do the study and come up with a series of recommendations and then not be able to implement them until July 1st, 2015. So these are the things that have been delayed. So to summarize, we're continuing to build on the information, the recommendations that the work teams made that became the HR design strategic plan, and we're continuing to have conversations with the campus. A lot of things, I won't go through this again because I mentioned them a couple of times, a lot of things that we're working on right now or have already been completed, like classified staff governance, setting up the executive committee that we're moving forward on right now, continuing to consult with governance groups, not just this shared governance advisory committee, but also the individual governance groups, the university committee, the academic staff executive committee, and the classified staff executive committee, and we'll continue to do that as well. And we're doing this in phases. Mentioned the delay, so we had to move some things back, but we moved some other things up, and we'll be implementing a series of changes between now and July of 2015, and then another series of changes after July 2015. So I'm going to turn it back to Harry. That's a quick trip through where we are right now and what's going to happen over the next year and a half, and I think we're going to have a little conversation now.
Thank you, Bob. Is the sound on? Let's see. Is it on yet? Nope. Okay, let's try a different one. I guess this.
Oh, there we go.
Now
there
it's
we
back.
Go.
Okay, wonderful.
Must have been operator error, Harry.
Could have been. Speaking of operator error, one of the things that people who have been watching on the live stream have noticed, and I got a text about this, is that we were getting a different feed for a little while. Hopefully that problem has been corrected. We think it's been corrected. So at this point, what we'd really like to do is hear from all of you in a couple of different ways. As I mentioned when we started, if you can just take a minute to pull out one of these sheets that's on your seats, and just take a minute to answer the 3 questions that are here. Do you, as a result of this presentation, combined with the things that you've been learning throughout the last several months, are you feeling knowledgeable about HR design at this point? Do you feel that you can explain it to a friend or coworker? And then very importantly as well, was it understandable? Is there anything else that we need to make sure we're making clear? So if you can please take a minute to give us that feedback, that would be greatly appreciated. This is also an opportunity, if you have a question that you'd like to pose on one of the white index cards, you can pass the questions towards the center, and David will go down the middle and pick those up. So thanks for taking the time to give us the feedback. Before we leave this afternoon, make sure to drop those off for us. We have a little box at the registration table to get those from you too. So we'll take questions both from the floor and by these index cards. So first question, Bob. After July 1st, 2015, will the university still be required to use low bid, such as the software for online recruiting?
Not being a procurement expert, I do not know. And I have Mark Walters and Steve Lund and Anjali Sridharan with me, and my guess is they don't know either.
Okay. So we don't have an answer to that question, but one of the things about getting these questions is that it helps us know what people are wanting to know answers to, so we'll be seeking the answer to that question.
I will say, though, that as far as I know, the procurement rules will not change as of July 1st, 2015. So whatever it is now, it's likely to be then.
Will unclassified staff vacation be by fiscal year or calendar year?
No changes at the moment to that. So whatever.
Oh, sorry, university staff. It was an abbreviation. Will university staff be by fiscal year or calendar year? Or what's your sense of how we're going to be dealing with that?
At the moment, we're not planning on, we haven't decided to make a change. The benefits work team did recommend that we integrate the leave calendars, and it sounded like a smart thing to do, but then when we started thinking about how we would actually do it, and would there be a transition period, and how that would affect people, it became clear that it's much more complicated. So we're still thinking about that, but we haven't made a decision about it.
Is that one of the areas that will be sorted out through one of the implementation teams over the next year, or when's that going to be happening?
I think so. Now, we did also make the decision that we would incorporate some of the decisions about benefits into the classification and compensation study and expand the study. So we may roll that into the study, or we may try to consider over the next year and a half. But there are all kinds of issues also around HRS. We'd have to make some programming changes to our payroll system as well.
So this is actually a related question. What changes do you anticipate for vacation, related to vacation compensation for university staff?
Vacation compensation? I don't know what that means.
The number of hours of vacation or the schedule of vacation?
Well, as I mentioned, the big change that we hope to make effective July 1st, 2015, will be to give newly hired university staff the ability to take their vacation during their first 6 months, which they cannot do right now. Again, the benefits team recommended that we merge somehow the vacation schedules for classified and unclassified staff into a single schedule. And again, that proved to be much more complex than it sounded because there are differences. So what do? Do we give everyone the greater amount, or do we give everyone the lesser amount, or do we average the two? So we decided that that was something that we wanted to take a more thoughtful look at. So that will be something that is likely to be included in the classification and compensation study. So we do not plan at the moment any changes to the actual vacation schedules on July 1st, 2015.
So this next question actually gives us a chance to recognize a couple of members of the new University Classified Staff Governance Council. Sure. The question is the classified governance group going to be as fully recognized and equal to the academic staff council and the faculty?
I think in practice it will be. Now, faculty and academic and students have statutory governance rights. I'm looking at my colleagues here and they're all nodding. Classified staff do not have statutory governance rights, but by policy they do. So as far as we're concerned, in practice, we will consult with the classified staff governance groups in the same way that we consult with the academic staff and the faculty. So for all intents and purposes, we expect to have the same kind of relationship with that group that we do with the other groups.
And I notice a couple of members of that classified staff governance group are here. Terry Fritter,
and Mary.
Right? Mary Chicksnett-Line are here. If there are others, I'm sorry. I'm
so,
not,
and I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions that you might want to pose of them after the session.
Mm-hmm. And David, any questions from the floor? No? Yeah, Terry?
Yeah, Bob, as you're talking about 1,700 job classifications,
yes,
and making less of them, that's not going to stop the pay progressions where you go from like food service worker 1, 2, 3 or something. You're not looking at eliminating a way that people are getting paid for skills and ability within their being promoted up. That's not going to be it.
No, and that's a good question. No, really what we want to do is create more career progression and make the job classification system a little more understandable. Right now we have job classifications that have one person in them, and we created that job classification because we wanted to pay the person more, but we couldn't through the compensation system. So we did a workaround with the classification system. But what we want to do is create more transparent opportunities for progression, but the idea certainly is not to eliminate those kinds of progressions. We may even expand them.
Thanks, Terry. So one other thing that's real important for us to be using this opportunity to explain is the Critical Compensation Fund. If you have other questions related to HR design, we can take those as well, but Bob wants to cover the Critical Compensation Fund.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. So Critical Compensation Fund, this is the second year that we've done this. We did it last year under our previous chancellor, and Chancellor Blank feels strongly that this is something that she wants to continue. So last week, oh, we're past that. Last week we issued the policy about the Critical Compensation Fund. Everyone should have gotten an email. We know that some folks don't have regular access at work to email, so we asked the HR folks to post the email in places where all of our employees could take a look at it. We also issued a policy, which we have copies of. Yes, I'm getting some nods outside, so you can actually take with you the policy on the Critical Compensation Fund. Last year, when we initiated this, each unit was told to allocate 2% of its payroll towards pay raises and bonuses as part of the Critical Compensation Fund. So Chancellor Blank is committed to making sure that we have the ability to provide pay raises. As you may know, we can't do across-the-board pay raises because we're still subject to the state compensation plan. So the only thing we can do across the board is what the state does, which this year was 1%, and in July of 2014 will be another 1%. But we can as long as we self-fund it, come up with approaches to provide raises, not to everybody, but to, for reasons of equity, retention, and performance. So we did this last year. We're rolling out phase 2 in November. As I mentioned last week, the material and the information went out. All employees should have gotten the CCF information. If there are segments of our employee population that didn't get it, let us know and we'll make sure that they do. It's always a little hit or miss with some of our folks, as I said, who don't have regular access to email, but we're trying to work with the HR folks to make sure that this information in hard copy gets posted. Specifics, 1% of payroll this year. Last year it was 2%, but this year it's 1%, given the more difficult budget situation. And that's all funds, so it's not just, and we can get real technical with the budget stuff, but it's not just appropriated funds. Those units that pay their employees with grant funds or program revenue funds also have to provide this 1%. So the total pool is 1% of the entire payroll across the university. The target is to give pay raises to 30% of our employees, but at least 20%. So basically what we've established is a range. We're recommending that the units provide it to 30% of their employees, but recognizing that there has to be some flexibility, a minimum of 20% within each category. So 20 to 30% of classified employees, 20 to 30% of academic staff, 20 to 30% of faculty, and so on. Minimum amounts. So for classified employees, it's 2% of the base salary or $1,000. For academic staff, it's 2% or $1,200. Now, the way we established the $1,200 is we took 2% of the average, the median salary of academic staff. Now, if we did that for classified staff, the minimum would be around $800, but we didn't think that was enough, so we raised the minimum to $1,000. So everyone who receives a critical compensation fund pay raise, if you're classified, you'll get at least 2% of your base or $1,000, whichever is greater. And it'll be pay raise. Last time we were limited, for some classified employees, we could only give them one-time bonuses, but we're not restricted by that anymore. So anybody who gets a pay raise, anybody who gets a critical compensation fund award, it will be in the form of a pay raise. So for classified employees, it'll be 2% of base or $1,000, whichever is greater. A lot of conversation about whether or not people who got awards last time should be able to get them this time. There were those who said, no, absolutely not. And then there were those who said, well, there shouldn't be any restrictions. If retention, equity, or performance are the criteria, then there shouldn't be any restrictions on who got them, who gets them. So what we decided to do is we're telling every unit, each unit, the majority of the funding, that 1%, has to go to employees who didn't get adjustments last time. So the majority of funds, 50.1%, have to go to people who didn't get it last time, but that excludes people who got lump sums last time. So if you got a lump sum last time, you're still eligible and it won't count against that 50%. Now, some units are urging, some organizations on campus, like the Academic Staff Executive Committee, are urging units to give more than 50% to new recipients, up to as much as 70%. But we're not going to regulate that, except to say that at least 50% of the funds have to go to new recipients. Classified employees will be based on merit. We have to go through the state, Office of State Employment Relations, DMC, discretionary merit compensation process. We don't have our own authority to give these raises. We have to make recommendations downtown to Office of State Employment Relations, and then we have to wait for OSHA to approve those recommendations. And typically they will approve performance-based raises through the DMC process, but nevertheless, we have to go through it. And then unclassified employee increases will be based on equity and retention, but not performance. We don't have the authority under state law to give performance-based raises to faculty and academic staff, only for classified employees. And let me back up for a moment. There are a couple of things that I want to mention that are not on here. The time period for the CCF adjustments will be now that we've issued the policy until March 31st. So we're giving units 4+ months to make these decisions. We're also urging the units, though, to do this sooner rather than later so that people get the full benefit of the raises. One thing that we heard loudly and clearly last time is that there was not enough communication about the criteria, about the process, about how units were deciding to give raises and bonuses. So we're trying very hard, starting last week, to communicate on an all-campus basis more broadly and effectively than we did last time. We've also included in the policy a requirement that each unit communicate to its own employees about what its criteria and process is to make decisions about who should get the awards. So we're hoping that that will make this a much more transparent process than it was last time. We heard from people who said, I didn't even know there was a critical compensation fund. And other people said, yeah, I knew sort of that there was a compensation fund, but I didn't know anything about how my unit was going to handle it. So we're trying to be more direct and more transparent this time. And we will lean on the units to communicate their criteria and processes sooner rather than later. So the bottom line, literally and figuratively, is 1% of payroll to be awarded to 20 to 30% of our employees on the classified side based on performance, minimum 2% of base pay or $1,000, whichever is greater. So much more information is in the policy, which is available to you in hard copy. We're also developing a set of frequently asked questions, which we will also post on our website. The email that went out last week, the original version of the email sent out to 15,000 employees said, if you had any questions, to contact Mark or Steve. But we corrected that because they didn't feel like they were up to the challenge of answering 15,000 questions. So we're now asking the employees to go through their HR representatives. But of course, we're also available to answer questions in the Office of Human Resources. So that's a summary of the Critical Compensation Fund.
So if you have questions related to the Critical Compensation Fund, or if you have questions that are still lingering related to the earlier presentation on HR design, glad to take more questions. Actually, if you can ask the question in the mic, that way we can get it through to the live stream.
Yes, sir.
I worked at housing, and not only were they less than transparent about the compensation plan, when they gave people these bonuses and stuff, they asked them to be secretive about it. So how?
Well, that's why we're telling the units that they need to communicate better this year about what the criteria are and how they're going to process these raises. You know, we'll do everything we can to make sure that the units do that.
And they have to prove, you know, or how do they, you know, back up how some of these people got the bonuses or whatever? And so
well, they should lay that out in their process. But you know, in terms of justifying individual bonuses, I don't think they're going to do that. But at least what we want them to do is tell their employees what the process is that they're going to go through. They're supposed to form a committee. They're supposed to identify the criteria. So we're hoping that that'll help people understand what's going on.
yeah, well, it's hard to understand when they're kind of keep it secretive, you know.
I can't disagree with that. Yeah, they do have to send a justification downtown. So, and that's not posted though, right? That's right.
Other questions?
Also, while you're thinking about other questions, let me also say that we, along with the budget office, are going to be monitoring to make sure that the 1% is spent, and it's spent on from 20 to 30% of their employees, and that 50% new recipients is also met. So we'll be monitoring as these decisions are made and as we get the information from the units. Last time we didn't do that until afterwards, and learned too late that some units did not spend the full 1%, and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen this time.
Other questions? Terry? Here, wait for Dave to bring this. Thanks.
Yeah, Bob, and the last one, there's people who didn't get reviews, didn't get performance evaluation, job evaluations, and there's people who are going to disagree with some of these performance evaluations. That if this is how they're going to base them, what avenue these people have to challenge the review that they're getting or the evaluation that they're getting?
Well, they're going to have to get evaluations, and in terms of recourse, I'm looking at Mark.
Well, they obviously attach an addendum.
You want to use the mic there? Thanks, Mark. Here,
If they have some
Concern.
you can use mine.
If the employee has doesn't agree with the performance evaluation, they do have the ability to attach an addendum to the performance evaluation indicating their concerns and how that evaluation, they believe that there were errors in the evaluation. There isn't an official appeal process with that, but the employee can go on record with that.
Can he go to he or she go to the ombudsman's office or come to you at
Sure,
campus HR and explain what's going on? Because even that addendum doesn't mean that they're going to be rated as highly as they believe they should be.
Sure. And so there are a variety of resources on campus that an employee can go to address that. Terry, you mentioned one area, the Ombuds office. They also can come to their human resource representative within their division. If they feel that they need to come to the Office of Human Resources, they can do that as well if they feel like they're being treated unfairly.
Other questions?
So for the last round of the CCF Phase 1, were classified employee pay increases also going through the same DMC process that's being required this time?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
but the difference last time was for classified non-exempt could not get pay raises, they can only get bonuses, one time only. This time they can get and will get pay raises.
Good questions. Other questions, either related to the Critical Compensation Fund or HR design and the update? So, as we said as we started, the important thing that we have here is that this is a continuing conversation, a continuing effort to try to make sure that everybody's informed as we move along. We know that when we started out on this process, we thought at this point the new project design would have been implemented and that we would be now at a point where we would be working with you on making sure that the implementation is going the way we're all intending. But given that a large part of the implementation is delayed till July 1st, 2015, we know that many people have had the impression that there's nothing happening. And as you can tell from Bob's presentation, that is clearly not the case. We're moving forward in several areas right now. We're moving forward in several other areas in the next year. And so we're going to want to make sure that we're continuing to keep people informed. If you have other questions, please send them in to the HR Design site. If you have any others here, we'll linger and be able to take final questions. I want to also thank people who are tuning in through the live stream, which will then also be kept so that if people didn't get a chance to hear the presentation this afternoon, they can check back on the site and be able to see it through that video. Thank you very much.
So thank you not only for being here today, but thank you more importantly for the work that you do. We are a world-class university because of the work that you do day in and day out, and we don't say that often enough, so thank you for that.